Travel is more than just ticking off countries. It's about the people, the culture, the food, the moments. I'm Pippa Hudson, and on Wonder the World, I invite you to join me every week as we explore destinations both near and far, with the help of fellow adventurers who share their unique travel stories. Listen to my podcast wherever you get them.
Two great nations, one critical moment, and your trusted voices bringing it home. Clement Manyathela and Tshidi Madia, live from the USA.
18 minutes before 11 o'clock. So I had a conversation with Tshidi Madia last night before we went to bed because we haven't really seen much of each other. She's been going around attending meetings. I've been going around meeting with people as well, attending meetings. So when I saw her by the lobby, I grabbed her and I said, we have to just wrap it all up for our listeners. So here's a conversation I had with Tshidi. Just bear in mind, it does get a little informal at some point. There are a few laughs there involved as well. But I just wanted you to get the raw conversation as we reflected on what we've heard so far and on what's happened here in Washington, D.C. ahead of that meeting today between the President Ramaphosa and President Trump.
All right, so it's been quite a hectic day here in Washington, D.C. Tshidi and I have only saw each other in the afternoon because we've just been busy going from meeting to meeting since we arrived here, trying to get off the record briefings as well. So I have just seen Tshidi now, and I thought, let me record this conversation for you guys. Tshidi, good morning.
Good morning.
It's evening here. It's evening here, but good morning at home.
Hi, it's like two ships in the night. We pass every once in a while. Hi, Clement.
Yeah, I just saw you at the hotel lobby and I thought, let me grab her right now. Okay, I want us to bring it all together for the listeners now. I want us to start with the delegation. There have been murmurs about whether or not there are some famous golfers that are going to be part of the delegation, some richest man in South Africa, and whether or not he played a role in clinching this meeting. What do we know now about who's going to be on that guest list tomorrow?
They call him the breadwinner, don't they? So the breadwinner, Johan Rupert, is confirmed. I've seen a list of those who will be in the delegation. You've got a 7-on-7 that will be sitting in the Oval Office, from my understanding. Our president, the ministers that are with him, Kumbuzo Ntshavheni, Ronald Lamola, John Steenhuisen, as well as, of course, Parks Tau. But then you also have the golfers, Ernie Els and Retief Goosen. I understand that if possible, they would have had Gary Player in the room. Apparently, allegedly, Donald Trump idolizes the ground that Gary Player walks on, but also is a big fan, apparently, and will be starstruck by seeing Retief Goosen in the room, by seeing any else, and that's what he'll be given tomorrow. The golfers will also be part of the delegation. These are people who are seen, of course, as patriots, but I think the most interesting figure is Johan Rupert, not only because of the fact that he's Johan Rupert and they call him a breadwinner, supposedly, but because of the role he supposedly played in getting this meeting on the table. Ramaphosa does, Clement, if you remember, becomes the first African president that Donald Trump hosts a working visit for.
Yeah, and if you remember, even when Ibrahim Rasool was here, he really struggled to get audience with any official from the Trump administration. So whether our government is going to admit it or not, it's very clear now the role that Rupert has played, especially now that we see him on that list of delegates.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, you need to remember a couple of things. One, the rules are out of the window here in Washington. I've been having conversations, as you said, you and I have been having meetings with various people. What people will tell you is that the rules, the standards, the norms are completely out the window. That it is a time, look at Russia, look at where hostage negotiations are happening, where Donald Trump is involved. It's about the networks. It's proximity to Trump that managed to get certain things done. A friend of a friend unlocks it. So what you were hearing is he's got proximity to Johan Rupert, Johan Rupert's got proximity to Ramaphosa, and that's where the in-betweener lies, right? So a lot of the rules, a lot of the diplomacy is out the window. Even the phone call, Clement, that President Ramaphosa made to Donald Trump. Vincent Magwenya, the spokesperson, says, no, there was no need for protocol to set up that call. President Ramaphosa just picked up the phone and said, hi, President Trump, it's President Ramaphosa. So that tells you that somebody greased the palms, softened, made things easier. And that's where South Africa is relying, not on diplomatic tools. The doors, as you said, were shut. The State Department's not fully set up as we speak still.
Yeah, and I wonder what you've been told in your meetings. But one of the things that came recurring and coming back during my conversations is that South Africa should have hired some lobby group of sorts, because as you say, things work differently in Washington DC. I was on a street earlier today meeting one of the local journalists on a street called Arcade Street, and that's a street where all of these big lobby businesses are lined up on that street, and that just shows you of how strong the lobbying sector is in Washington DC. What did you hear about whether or not South Africa prepared enough on the ground before the meeting?
First of all, lobbying culture is a very big American thing. You see it even with the super PACs when you go to American elections, that they have such a massive sway in the turnout of events. So the idea that South Africa didn't go that way is concerning for many here. I get it. And there's a difference of opinion within the South African camp, by the way. There are those who complain about not being lobbied are complaining because they didn't lobby to them specifically. That's the complaint that somebody in South Africa is like, yeah, because they feel left out. But there's also a view from some in the South African camp that we didn't need to. There's an overconfidence that we suddenly have that I think does,
which is scaring me a bit.
That does concern even
based
me.
On what I've been hearing this morning.
Even me, I was they were rattled day one when I arrived in Washington, and watching that switch has been very fascinating, and it leads some people to believe it's a trap, but we'll talk about that. But for now though, there is concern about lobbying, but I know that there have been meetings happening. We've seen a few in terms of the ministers themselves going back and forth, but there have been meetings with DDGs. There are other officials that aren't as well known to the public that have been back and forth in meetings. They only got sight of the Oval, Clement, about a day or so ago. They've been dealing with the State Department. When they eventually started dealing with the Oval Office, I must tell you, the grins got very big, and it felt easier for them, supposedly, finally having access to the Oval. And the impression that they had, I mean, somebody was even laughing, saying, Zelensky's team didn't even get a working lunch. We do, that they feel that a red carpet's going to be rolled out for Ramaphosa. But I also think we need to recognize that America is also dealing with its own domestic issues. The Republicans and the Democrats have a lot of their own problems that are also at play. You also have a state apparatus here that is, I think it's such a hard way to put it, but they're depressed. They're being what, there's a word, man. I want to say that hollowed out. Sorry, they're being hollowed out by the administration. So the technocrats are also dealing with their own issues. America's going through a lot. When we say Rakowisha, the American state in and of itself is also in a very depressed.
It's going.
It's in a funk, so to speak. So you're also dealing with people who are putting their own issues actually on the table without putting their issues on the table. They're projecting in some instances. I'm not saying we're going to have a walkthrough. I'm not saying that they're correct. But I think a dim view on every single thing, even based on what we are seeing ourselves, is not a legitimate picture of what's at play.
Yeah, so you spoke about the overconfidence coming from the South African government. You're speaking about skepticism coming from some of the locals we've spoken to here. Based on everything else that you've heard, what do you think Ramaphosa is walking into this morning?
Yeah, Clement, it's such a hard one, eh?
It is.
It's very difficult, even for me, to say, okay, this is what I think. I did speak to the president. I was part of the journalists who saw him at the SA embassy yesterday. And again, overconfidence. Again, cool, calm. I think we keep saying that this is a person who's got charm offensive. We keep saying that compared to Zelensky and even Mark Carney of Canada, South Africa is almost at a distance in that it's not here with a begging bowl. It doesn't directly, desperately need America's intervention. Zelensky needed it with conflict. Canada's shelves are filled with American products. So there's a slight difference in that, and one would hope that he uses that as a leverage. I'm hoping that Ramaphosa works in whatever he finds, remembering all the tools that he has to try and put up a front so that we don't see an escalation and get to where we were with Zelensky. I'm hoping. I don't think anybody really wants to see our president humiliated. That's the number one thing.
But also our president, I think, is more... How do I put this? Zelensky is always a theatrical man. He's an actor.
Yes.
And so I think the president has an ability, the same way that the Canadian Prime Minister was able to stand firm but still give Trump what he needs. The same way that Keir Starmer was able to stand firm but still give Trump what he needs.
Keir Starmer came with the letter from the king. I think that you need to assess Makani a little bit. He did get a dressing down, but he did defend Canada through and through. And I think that might be closest to what I think Ramaphosa might come with.
too.
I do think that there might be a moment where they want an apology for Ibrahim Rasool. I will not be surprised if that concession has to come from South Africa. I think South Africa is ready for it because by and large, South Africans agree that the ambassador was in the wrong. So I don't think it makes South Africa look bad to concede to things like that. Do we get a concession that there is no bloody genocide in South Africa? We deserve one. There's no question. Will we get one?
It is not coming. Okay, ICJ. Every single person, including the Democrats I spoke to today, said that is a big one. And if South Africa doesn't make a concession on that, then you're not doing enough to show America that you are with it.
Here's the difficulty, Clement, right? Donald Trump has a constituency to appease, but guess what? So does Cyril Ramaphosa. Ramaphosa has a country to appease. They've taken a stance on principle, right? A moral position on the fight for Palestine. You don't get to backtrack from a position of morality. You don't get to concede, because where do you leave a nation? What must we think of you as a leader if you go on a global stage and then you concede on something this critical that you've told us is rooted in our foundational values as a people? It's tied to our Ubuntu. The apartheid struggle is tied to what we say we see in Palestine. So there is no room for a concession. I think there's a room for a careful approach around Palestine. There is a belief in the South African camp that there's a shift towards where South Africa stands. And part of that is about the humanitarian crisis that everyone's outraged about, including U.S. President Donald Trump. He's growing quite impatient with Benjamin Netanyahu. So there's hope that's seen as something. I actually asked Ronald Lamola, the international relations minister, about that. I said, people are saying that it's actually not a shift towards your position about Israel being genocidal, but it's a shift towards the human rights crisis. Everybody's in agreement. And Ronald Lamola said, no government's going to come right out and say, we actually think we're wrong and South Africa is right. But those shift in positions closer to our position, and you must be able to read that. And in that regard, around the humanitarian aspect of it, they definitely are moving closer to where South Africa's stance is.
I mean, Donald Trump went all the way to the Middle East and snubbed Israel. In his first term, when he went to the Middle East, he did go via Israel. It's going to be so interesting because, as you say, that positioning has changed. But also, I wonder, what does Israel have to offer America? Again, Trump is a transactional man. What does Israel has to offer? And it's a question that I've just seen others ask as well around. I think the president realizes that at the end of the day, I want a deal. Is there a deal or no deal?
And I think that's the question that Benjamin Netanyahu needs to explain to Donald Trump himself. Like, this relationship will continue to what end? What is the benefit? Because America is in an era where it's looking to derive some benefit. Absolutely. There was a strategic document that America has from as far back, I think the last review was done in 2022. South Africa is at the heart of some of the strategic plans around African continent. But what's also interesting about this document is things like PEPFAR and USAID have fallen away, but they were part of that strategy. So there is this thing where I keep going back and forth about what America is looking for, right, as far as the deals are concerned, and as it throws out the soft power aspect, instruments, the carrot. I always say that, it's characteristic politics. You must always opt for the carrot, and I think that it'll be interesting for me to see where Trump goes.
Let's look at those deals.
The Israeli question, but it is a greater, broader question that America needs to speak about.
Okay, let's
no sleep.
The deals. Speaking of the deals, what are you hearing on the ground? There was an interest. Always we've known from America that they've got interest in minerals on the African continent. Gwede Mantashe earlier today said, well, nothing's going to be signed without a discussion here.
Pick up earlier yesterday said no discussion.
They'll be fine.
They'll
figure it out.
They'll know you're tired.
Yeah, so what deals are we looking at here? Are we looking at a minerals deal? Is it gas? What are we looking at?
Do you know that I've been talking about gas for months on end, like I'm a crazy person? Anyone who's ever actually spoken to me about American South Africa, I'm like, is there gas in South Africa? Where is there gas in South Africa? Is it Mossel Bay? Where are we shelling? Fracking, where is it happening? And
nowhere, because there's court cases every day stopping it.
Wait, let me get there first. Hey, Clement. So I could never get a proper answer because there's court cases to stop fracking everywhere. Wala peace, our papa. But that has been part of the conversation. So I do understand that gas is actually there. Somebody had said to me months ago, beginning of the year actually, that Americans want gas, but we can't fully explore gas. And we can't fully sign off. These were ministers saying we can't fully sign off on such. These are things that the president must co-sign, these particular deals. So it feels very much like that we are there, where we actually still don't have the answers as to what kind of, how much, what do we actually have to offer as far as gas is concerned.
Just golfers and vibes is not going to work.
No, he's here for the money, right? So there are talks about gas, but again, the problem with that is untapped. The problem with that is fracking. And the problem with fracking, as you've pointed out, is that it is in the courts every day. So it's a contested terrain. But there's also a conversation around the minerals. South Africa proudly saying on the minerals list that the Americans are looking for, it's got 12 of those minerals. But here's the thing. South Africa also thinks it's still in a position to influence the continent in favor of America. And I don't know if they've got it right there. You can say the DRC is an example, but any country, for goodness sake, is an example. Lesotho's within South Africa's borders, and Lesotho felt the fury of America when it was saying that it's a nothing country. It started making all sorts of very weird offers to America to get seen, to get noticed, to deal with the issue of tariffs, to try and appease America. So any country will do whatever is required to look out for its interest. What's interesting for me, Clement, is even as South Africa enters the Oval Office and makes a deal for South Africa, is what is the impact then of the region? Because see, when something like AGOA was taken care of, and if it's something that effectively is now null and void, it's not going to batter South Africa as hard as it is going to batter the rest of the region. So South Africa is looking for self and making a deal for self. What does that say about the rest of SADC? Yeah. And this is a South Africa that's already complaining that it's burdened by what's happening in the SADC region, that migration is an issue, that it's got so many issues because of the lack of prosperity in the region. What does that do? The whole system needs to work. So a part of me is wondering how South Africa is going to navigate that. It's a very fine balancing act. You can't say, or if AGOA is off the table, we'll make an alternative deal, which is what South Africa keeps saying. Yeah. It can't be an alternative deal that's outside. It cannot be sans all those other countries in that region.
Yeah, they're arguing that that creates an opportunity for us to go to other markets, but you don't find other markets in 2 weeks or in a month or in two. It's a whole process. In the meantime, what's happening? What's the consequence, to your point? By the way, I was surprised when I spoke to the presidency the other day, and the suggestion I got was they're not going to talk about tariffs this time around. They want to leave that for some other time, which I thought, that would be a missed opportunity. When are you going to get the opportunity like this?
I find it really weird that we are being told you've got a deal in hand. Né? I actually asked this question and it felt stupid to them at the time. But if you've got a deal in hand and it's a package, it's a package, South Africa, why would you leave Patricia de Lille out if tourism is one of your greatest selling points? I didn't get it. I was like, that's low-hanging fruit. Surely she's part of your delegation. So for me, there's some things about the way this strategy was approached that I'm not convinced. I don't have the buy-in on as yet. I still have to wait and see it play itself out and to get more details. They are tight-lipped. They are very worried about getting their action plan out. But again, you said it's not just vibes and golf. You'd be surprised that it might come down to just that.
Maybe I won't be surprised if history is anything to go by. Okay.